Event. All right, I think we are live now. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Eric Copeland, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for this webinar. And we have Phil Bell, who is a professional college planning expert with Yorkshire College Planning. You want to go ahead and say hi real quick, Phil?
Hi, how are you, everybody? Glad you took the time to check out some stuff about college planning today with us.
Nice. So if we have, I see some people coming in. So we got Jennifer and Sandra. We got Glynis. Nice. We're kind of curious, like what cities you guys are tuning in from. So if you don't mind, maybe just pop it in the chat real quick. What city you're popping into while we're kind of doing our introductions here. So if you're tuning in today, so you're here because we're going to be talking about FAFSA. All right. All right. Can I get that to roll off my tongue? FAFSA. Right.
FAFSA, there you go.
I was quite amazed to find that there was, I think it was over like 2.5 or 2.7 billion dollars that was actually just left on the table of this free college money. And as much political noise as there's been about, funding college and stuff, I was blown away by this because I'm like, holy moly, how many, kids could have gone to school if they had had access to that money, and why did that not happen? And I was shocked to find out that one of the number one reasons that the money didn't come through to them is because of the application process. They were either intimidated by it and just didn't get it in on time or get it done at all, or they didn't know how to answer the questions. And I believe there's like 85 questions at present on it. And so what you're going to learn today is about those questions and the factors that play into answering those questions correctly, because what I've learned from Phil is that if there is a fine line between doing it right and between doing it wrong, and there's some factors when it comes to your finances that most people just don't know. And if you answer the question wrong, I mean, things coming down to the value of your home, all sorts of little things you're going to learn today, you'll realize that if you're in a process of applying, you're going to want to hear this information first. If you've applied before and you're going to have a reapplication come up again, you're definitely going to want to hear this, because this can make a huge difference in whether you're either going to get any money or the amount that you're going to get. Let's see. All right, so we got Jennifer from Riverside. Tammy's tuning in from Dove Canyon. Nice. I'm not sure if I know where Dove Canyon's at. Riverside for sure. So just a little so housekeeping, let everyone know what to expect. So we're going to run this webinar for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to open up to questions at the end of it. And if you have some questions relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, feel free to pop them in the chat feed, and we may be able to answer them, as we're going. But we're definitely going to be able to take some questions at the end. And also, we encourage you to stay to the end, because we have something for you at the end of this. If you'll stick around to the end of the webinar, we're going to show you how you can sit down with Phil for free and get an evaluation on your FAFSA application. Get some specific answers to your situation. And Phil has worked with over 3,500 students now?
Yeah, approaching 4,000 right now. Yeah.
Okay, so almost 4,000 students. And how many years ago did you get started with college planning?
20.
Okay, so for 20 years. You've been helping kids go not only get the finances for college, but Phil also actually manages their entire college experience. So it's about retention, it's about financing college, it's about performance, and he's basically handholds that student every year that they're in college and make sure that they do well and get the most out of their experience. But we know that one of the biggest barriers to entry is the financial aspect of it. And so that's why we're here today. For anyone just tuning in now, we're going to be talking about FAFSA and how to apply for it properly, how to answer all 85 questions correctly, the underlying principles that guide that. And we're going to show you how to be able to sit down for free with Phil and have your specific needs evaluated. All right, so we got the chat roll coming in. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and get moving with the meat and potatoes here of the presentation, but go ahead and tune in. So it looks like some people might be having some connection issues. It could be on your end. Make sure you don't have like if there's anyone else on Wi-Fi in your house, if they're streaming Netflix, or if you have cell phones connected to the Wi-Fi, Maybe try to disconnect other devices and any background programs on your computer, like Google Drive or Dropbox or things like that, that could be maybe uploading or downloading. Go ahead and shut those down, so that might help. If that doesn't work, maybe try refreshing and re-entering the room. And if for some reason, it's having so much trouble you can't hear, do know we are going to offer a replay to this. In 24 hours, we'll be able to send you a recording to it. Okay. All right, so Darylyn said, I logged out and reconnected and it works now, so good to hear. All right, so let's get moving into it. So Phil, you have basically 7 principles that you're kind of your guiding light whenever you're helping a kid plan for their application to file for the FAFSA aid.
Correct.
And I wanted to go over those 7 things with you and have you kind of tell us what each of those means and why it matters and how it affects the outcome. So the first one I have in front of me is that your first strategy is that you have to accurately determine your current expected family contribution, or what is called EFC. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is? Sure. And how you calculate it?
Sure. So let me back up for just a second to one of the beginning statements about parents and their feelings about the FAFSA form, feelings about filing for financial aid. And a lot of folks out there are thinking, well, I have a middle income, I have 3 kids, all of my money is being used for a myriad of other things, but I know with a middle income, I'm not going to qualify for financial aid, so I don't even apply. And that is the huge problem. It's one of the things we'll talk about in a moment, that families really need to kind of get over and understand that the FAFSA form is a gatekeeper, is really the document at which all the colleges across the United States use to determine if you're going to get aid. After you complete the FAFSA, the first thing that they're going to be able to see is this thing that Eric is alluding to right now, the EFC. The EFC stands for your expected family contribution. That is the amount of money that you as a family are expected to pay, regardless of where your son or daughter were to go to school. So Harvard is going to have an EFC. Palomar College is going to have an EFC. And they may vary a little bit depending upon the school, but suffice it to say the college is going to use that amount of money to determine how much aid, how much money from the college you're actually going to get. So it's very, very important that, first of all, you as a parent understand, well, what is that number for me? What is the number that the college is going to use to determine if I'm financially needy from their perspective? And then how much aid based on that EFC are we going to award? So just from what I've just said, you can see that by driving the expected family contribution to a level that A, we know what it is, and B, if there's any tools that we can use to lower the EFC, our financial aid eligibility then increases. So that's the other key, that the expected family contribution is the start. And from that start, then there's tools that you as a parent, myself as a college planner, use to better the financial aid that you're going to be receiving from any kind of college or university your son or daughter is going to apply to and be admitted at.
So that kind of leads me to a question, Phil. I'm actually just out of curiosity, since you've worked with so many students and their parents, and you've done many, FAFSA applications. How many times would you say, if you were just to put I don't know, how many times out of 10, whenever a parent comes in and they have the application, or maybe they think they've calculated their EFC, how many times is this actually correct versus you saying, actually, it could be tweaked to this based on your actual information?
Well, that's a great question, Eric. And I'm going to kind of defer to the Department of Education. The Department of Education, who is the firm, that, if you will, the agency that manipulates the financial aid system in America today. But more than importantly than that, they are in charge of the FAFSA form. They say that 90% of FAFSAs go in with errors the first time. 90%. So what happens? What is that an important? Why should I even be worried about that? Well, you need to be worried about that because financial aid, probably more than anything, is first come, first serve. So you want to have your information in correctly the first time, Because if your form is kicked back to you, now you have to make corrections, then resubmit it. But all these other people that have their applications waiting are going to be evaluated first, and then your second submittal is going to come into play. So that's why we really need to have your information correct the first time at the top of the pile. So that's from the Department of Education. That's not from me at all. That's directly from them.
Very good. So if you're just tuning in, we're on a live webinar here with Phil Bell. He's a college planning expert with Yorkshire College Planning. And we're talking about the FAFSA application because over $2 billion was missed out on FAFSA funding simply because of not either turning in the application, filling it out correctly, or just intimidation from not knowing how to answer the questions. So what we're doing is Phil has broken down, there's 7 basic principles that need to be understood and calculated correctly before the application is filled out, and that this will dial up the success rate to a super high level for getting the funds that you need. And so the first one is the EFC, the expected family contribution. So it sounds like this is like probably the first one and the biggest one, like where there's the most mistakes made on it. If you don't get this right, you're really throwing off the numbers. Correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Got to submit the FAFSA. That's the key.
Now, you did mention, that it's a little harder if you kind of get thrown to the bottom of the list if you're reapplying. Is that what I understood that you said?
That's correct. Yeah, if you have errors on the first submittal of the FAFSA and for whatever reason it gets kicked back by the processors, they'll send it back to you and it'll say, look on this page, look on this area, you have errors, correct them. They don't tell you what the actual response should be. They leave it up to you to determine what the right answer is. So that's the other issue with the FAFSA form. It's very nebulous in its instructions, and then when it does come time to be corrected, that even becomes more problematic because you don't know what the right answer is.
Glennis had a question. I don't know if it's a serious or funny question. It says, so what's going to happen to that $2 billion that was lost? Like, I'm sure it's going to go to infrastructure and amazing things. I don't know. Do you know what happens to that money?
Yeah, just money that doesn't get spent. It goes back to the general fund of the United States, whatever that's called. Yeah.
They got to clean up the golf courses. Let's see. All right, so that's the EFC. So let's move into the second strategy. And you say that the second thing you need to understand is whether you are funding the most beneficial retirement accounts during the college years. Now, that almost sounds like out of left field, like retirement accounts, college years. So that's something to think about, right? Whenever you're filling out FAFSA, could you explain that to us and why that matters?
Sure. I mean, college funding today is going to be the second largest expense that you as a parent are going to have. The first, of course, would be the home mortgage. The second comes the college funding. So when you're looking at a school that costs $70,000 or $80,000 a year, as they soon will be, how does that work? How does that ultimately get paid? So we've got to look at the scenarios that are presented to us, and of the $60,000, $70,000 that private schools are costing today and soon will be $80,000, you've got to figure out, well, what is my possibility of even retiring? Can I even retire? Am I stuck with this? Families today say that about 40% believe it's going to take them over a decade to pay back the college expenses. A decade in retirement looming or maybe present. So is college funding a retirement question? I believe it absolutely is, because you can borrow all day for college, but if there's anyone out there in the audience that knows any sort of loans that you can get for retirement, as a wealth manager, please tell me, because I have got a lot of folks that would love to be able to borrow for retirement if they just don't exist. So you have to figure out, well, if I'm going to mortgage my retirement to be able to pay for my son or daughter's education, shouldn't that mortgage be as small as we possibly can make it? And of course, the answer is yes. So the tools that are out there include things like, which was number 2 on our list, of funding different types of retirement accounts, because there's some that are very, very good to use and some that are not good at all. Sometimes people view the 401k as, well, I can defer this money from my paycheck and the colleges will never even see it. Well, that's not true. They are going to see it. It is going to be a reportable expense on your tax return. And actually that money that you've contributed to your 401k gets added back to that expected family contribution. So now it goes back to the EFC that we talked about. So funding the correct retirement accounts is critically important. Funding the kind of accounts that do not get added back, that do not create any kind of penalty, if you will, for us that have college-bound kids. So those are the kind of things we as parents need to understand and stay away from if we can, and maximize the things that we can. And that's what the retirement number 2 on your list is referencing. The good ones and some of the ones that are not so good.
Yeah, so it's basically just learning how to be as smart as possible with, where and how the money's coming from.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. And thanks to Glynis, by the way. I see you answered Sandra's question. Okay, so that's number 2. So let's move into the third strategy here, is understanding whether your investment assets are optimally positioned. So it sounds like it's kind of related a little bit. I guess retirement's more of a long-term, later investment. What kind of investments are you referring to here, and what does it mean to be optimally positioned during the college years? What does that mean?
There's different assets that are includable, or what the college calls accessible, in the financial aid formula. Basically, it becomes really easier to identify the 3 that are not accessible, and those include retirement accounts, life insurance, and annuities. Life insurance and annuities have kind of a bad rap out there. We personally don't use them. We use other types of funding mechanisms for college, but the assets that you have in everything else, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, retirement accounts that are accessible or added to on a yearly basis, like the 401k I just talked about, those things are accessible. So from the standpoint of, let's say, $100,000 in a mutual fund, you're going to be assessed $5,600 of that, because it's assessed at 5.6%. $5,600 of that goes right back to the expected family contribution. There's that thing again that keeps popping up. So you really have to understand, well, from the retirement perspective, from my the life insurance and from the annuities, I feel kind of safe in that area. But from my other funds, my goodness, what do we have to do? So repositioning assets prior to FAFSA submittal is absolutely essential if you want to maximize your ability for a lower expected family contribution.
Very cool. All right, so for anyone who's just tuning in, we do have some people showing up a little late here. We're talking about the FAFSA application and the 7 key factors that play into getting that application not only accepted, but getting you the maximum amount of aid available based on your financials as a family. And what we've learned so far from Phil Bell, who we have here, is a college planning expert with Yorkshire College Planning, is that most people don't realize how much money is available to them. Often they disqualify themselves, assuming they feel like they're in that zone. I make too much money, but not enough to send my kid to pay for it, but I need some help. He's saying there's ways to qualify for stuff, and you have to know how to do these calculations. So anyone who has questions about the specifics of the calculation, just stick around to the end of this webinar, and we're going to provide a link to you. Phil is offering you'll be able to sit down with him one-on-one for free, and you can ask him some specific questions. Okay, about maybe your retirement accounts or that kind of stuff. Yeah, so if any specific questions like that, we'll get those questions answered for you. But we do need to present some of this content and get through it so we can, get a general understanding of what works here. So moving on, so that's the investment assets. So strategy number 4, you say don't make the 2 most costly mistakes uninformed parents make filling out the FAFSA. So that kind of rings a bell here. What are the 2 most costly mistakes that they make? Sounds like a big deal, and we want to avoid that.
Yeah, understand that the FAFSA includes certain things that are not looked at. One of the things that is not looked at is your personal residence. So your personal residence, you can live in $1 million house and not really have to worry about, is this going to hurt me? Because it's not. Unfortunately, though, as adults, we view our homes as our what? Our biggest asset. So when it comes down to putting what is my assets, you're automatically going to be thinking, well, what is my house worth? So you're going to pull up Zillow and Trulia and maybe Redfin, and you're going to look at what all the comps are in the area and base some sort of a number on your residence. Absolutely, the wrong thing to do because it's not accessible at all. So when you put $600,000 down as the value of your home, you've just cost yourself any financial aid you're going to receive because that number actually should be zero. Okay.
And they don't tell you this on the form. They don't tell you that you're, excluding house.
No, they don't, unfortunately.
Oh my God, it's almost like they're setting you.
Business. So let's say you have a small business like we do, and you have less than 100 employees. Okay. Again, the question on the FAFSA form is going to ask you about the value of any kind of assets. A business is an asset. If it's less than 100 employees, guess what the value of your business is for the form? Zero.
Which is going to be most people
are going to think, well, the value of my business is going to be based on my net income and all these kind of things. I'm going to look up my Schedule C, my 1120 form and figure out, okay, no, unless you have more than 100 employees, the value of your business is zero. So those two things right there, the value of your home and small businesses with less than 100 employees, the actual response should be zero. Okay. And there's another form out there. There's another financial aid form called the CSS profile that does value both of those. So it's absolutely essential that you understand how to value your home and your business correctly in that scenario. But we're talking about the FAFSA today. So I just want to stick to that because we could go down a whole bunch of rabbit trails and we just end up with chasing rabbits all day long.
Well, I think FAFSA is like you said, it's the one that most universities or colleges, that's the
all 4,000 of institutions across the United States.
Okay.
Yep.
That blows my mind. I mean, it's amazing that they say, well, we have this money to offer for school, and then they don't even tell you on the question about your assets that if you put the value of your home on there, that you could literally be shooting yourself in the foot.
Correct.
Getting the funds. That is unbelievable to me. So it almost sounds like, Phil, like what you've done is in your years of experience in researching and know where the actual factors are, you've in essence built kind of the fine print instructions behind all the questions.
We believe that. Yeah.
And there's just no way a person would know that. Like there's no way they would know that. If you're just filling out an application, you would assume you're just following the instructions on the application. If it asks for assets, you put assets. And if you throw your home in the mix, that's unbelievable to me. So that is a big reveal, guys, for everyone tuning in. And that's a take notes on that. When you're filling out that form, do not, if it's FAFSA, do not put the value of your home. And if you have a small business under 100 employees, it's going to be 99%. Your value of that business as an asset is zero. That's huge. Those are two things. So, wow, that is really amazing to me. All right. So I see now why they used to call it the 2 most costly mistakes.
Yeah.
That's a golden nugget. That right there could be a game changer for people filling this out. All right. Strategy number 5, you say, is to understand how to best maximize a 529 plan before and during the college years. I guess what's a 529 plan and what do you mean by maximizing it?
Sure. So a 529 plan is a college savings plan. It was derived by a bill in Congress that created this college funding mechanism several years ago, and it's in the IRS, Internal Revenue Code under Section 529. And 529 plans are used by all 50 states. Some states actually even have more than one 529, but they're college funding tools specifically meant to pay for college. Okay. So you can put money into a 529 account and they can invest in a number of different things. They can invest in stocks and bonds and cash and there's a myriad of different things that different states will use. California has the Golden State Scholar Share, for instance.
Okay.
The key, though, thing to remember is, and it's going back to the asset question. Remember we said that assets that are assessed include everything except for retirement accounts, life insurance, and annuities. So would a 529 be accessible? The answer to that question is yes, it is. How do we make it unaccessible or not accessible? Well, really, it comes down to ownership. Okay, ownership. What do I mean by that? When a 529 account is opened, there is an owner, and that's typically the parent, and then there's a beneficiary, and that typically is the student. So when we look at those two components, we really can't do much about the beneficiary as the student. We want the student to be able to access the money for college, but the owner, that's where we can make a change. So instead of the parent owning that, because it's an asset that's going to be accessible for them since they own it, what about if we use a grandparent? What about if we use a brother or maybe a sister of the parent, of course? Ones, of course, that don't have their own kids going to college because we don't want to compromise their ability to pay for college. But the 529 account owned by a grandparent, let's say, is not accessible. Nowhere on the FAFSA form does it say, what are the assets held by your grandparent for the student? Now, some people go, well, that's not fair. But you know what? If you look at the largest holders of 529 accounts today, it's not parents.
Grandparents.
Grandparents.
Gotcha.
Right.
That makes
So
sense.
let's think about that ownership change. When I talked about moving assets, that's definitely one of the assets. If you have a 529 plan, you should seriously consider moving to ownership of the grandparent with the parent as a co-owner, if you will, or actually even better would be the beneficiary in case the parent passed away.
And is that process, can that be done quickly? And is it?
It can be done very quickly. Yeah. I mean, depending upon what type of investment management you have, it could be as simple as picking up the phone and saying, I'd like to change the ownership. A new form would be generated, sent to the grandparents. They would sign it. There's no tax implications for them. We get this question all the time. There's no tax implications for that perspective. But in your particular situation, before you do that, talk to your financial planner, talk with your tax professional, and make sure for you that it makes the best sense. We always say that. It has to be a particular situation for you.
Okay, so this would be an area where it's don't self-diagnose on this. You're going to maybe get a little bit of professional advice on that part of it.
You definitely need to get.
Gotcha. But just know that this is a strategy, that it's a way to reduce or to adjust that. I guess everything comes back to that EFC.
It does. It does.
Gotcha.
Assets and EFC seem to drive the day. Yeah.
Expected family contribution. So, okay. Strategy number 6, you say, is to pay for college with pre-tax dollars if you have a small business. That sounds interesting. How does that work?
Right. So there's a couple of tools that are available out there. If you do own your own business, you can, again, going back to the retirement accounts, you can fund the correct retirement account. Things like a SEP IRA, things like maybe a Section 127 plan, which is paying for college for your employees. This is kind of an interesting one because you can actually have a benefit within your company that pays for college called a Section 127 plan. And you can pay for college for your employees' benefit. Now, since you own the company, you can make your student the beneficiary, if you will, of that. And they can have their college paid for on a pre-tax basis. You're still going to have to pay the money for college, but it's better to come out pre-tax than after you pay taxes on it. It just makes more sense from a financial perspective. Funding the correct retirement accounts also makes a huge difference. If you can have a deferred compensation plan, remember I said 401k plans and contributions to those are added back. Contributions to deferred compensation plans are not added back. So if you have that ability as a small business owner, that's definitely the way to kind of get the best money working the best way for you. Okay. I mean, we work hard for our money. I believe as a wealth manager, we need to try to get as much as we can for our money to work for us.
Gotcha. So the idea here is just to go about this as intelligently as possible, to understand what the real factors are driving the decision making behind the FAFSA qualifications, which unfortunately they do not reveal to you or guide you in any way on the forms. They kind of leave it up to, they assume, well, if you don't know, you don't know. Sorry, which is unfortunate. So fortunately, there's people like you, Phil, that has spent, dedicated their life essentially to understanding this stuff. Okay, so let's move into, so we got strategy number 7. You say is you need to determine how to maximize borrowing money during the college years. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So ultimately, when a student gets admitted to a school, they're going to get a document called an award letter. And an award letter is a line-by-line description of the aid, the money that school is going to offer your son or daughter to come to their institution. That award letter is going to be broken apart into grants and scholarships, which what is known as free money in the business. It doesn't have to be repaid. And then there's loans and work study. That's called self-help aid. Now, work study, on-campus employment, your son or daughter is actually going to get a paycheck. They can spend it however you as a family decide. And then come loans, okay? And we get this question a lot, which typically this time of year, when the parents realize that, well, loans are going to be a part of my college experience, if you will, but what are the best loans out there? So remember, we talked at the very beginning of this webinar, what's the most important thing to do to get access to college aid? And that's simply to file the FAFSA, okay? By filing the FAFSA, getting back to loans now, you're now eligible to get preferential loans called Stafford loans or called direct loans.
Okay.
Those loans can be, some of them, if by filling out the FAFSA form correctly, can be no interest or what are called subsidized loans. Subsidized means that the interest is paid by the federal government while your son or daughter is in college. 6 months after they graduate, then repayment needs to be started, and that's again spread over 20 to 30 years. So there's different loans out there. There may be even some parent loans that are preferential. The caveat, and I think the most important thing you need to remember as a parent is when you're looking at loans, the hierarchy is get all the federal loans that you can or want to, because those have the best payback provisions. Those have the provisions for loan forgiveness. All those things are in play in a federal loan. After you've maximized that, then if you still have the need, drop down into the private loan sector, and then there's a whole myriad of things you need to consider from that perspective. Again, the last thing we want to do is to mortgage our retirement, but more than anything is to have to pay for our kids' education for a 30-year period of time if we don't have to. And that's the other issue that really are a lot of people out there that have taken way too much debt on and unfortunately may never, ever see themselves get out of college debt. So.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I know, I have friends, meet people all the time and that have, massive student loan debt, and they're out of college and they, didn't get as amazing of a job right away as they thought they would. And they, and almost the stress of having to pay that loan stifles their motivation, and it affects the jobs they get. I mean, it's an irony. It kind of like, there's a lot that goes into it. So I think it's super critical. I think the cost of school is inflated in a lot of areas, but absolutely, if there's federal money to be had. So it sounds like that your philosophy is this: get as much free money as you can, right? And that's going to knowing how to fill out the FAFSA is your first step with that. And filling out correctly, knowing what the real meaning behind the questions are, how to truly calculate your AFC, how to not accidentally do things like throw your house or your business into as assets when they actually don't qualify and shoot yourself in the foot on funding. And then all the other factors, if you're using a retirement account or what's called the 529 account, maybe moving that to your grandparents. There's all sorts of strategies you have where you could help, when you sit down with someone, you could help position them and to align them with the most amount of money that they're going to be able to get for free. And that's going to, obviously, that's as much money as you get free, as much money as you don't have to borrow.
Right.
Then it sounds like even if they do need to borrow money, that just by filing that FAFSA, doing it correctly, you get the double advantage of now qualifying for certain loans that have included in them things like loan forgiveness, no or low interest rates. So in other words, they're easier to pay off. Are any of these because some of in the election year, there was a lot of controversy over, schools and paying for school and whatnot. But one of the things was like the student loan debt trap. Are those the notorious loans that say you can't file the bankruptcy on and all that kind of stuff? Is that coming from from the private sector? Is that the private loans, or is that also federal loans, or are you saying that they can avoid some of that stuff as well?
Yeah, they can avoid some of that. And again, it depends on a lot of different things. The career path that the student has chosen offers sometimes loan forgiveness. So that would be, the reason, one of the reasons I think to get into the federal loans first. Private loans have, as well as federal loans, have a whole bunch of conditions that say if you do this, you still owe us the money. If you do this, you still owe some money. Bankruptcy is one of those things. You can't get out of your student loans by declaring bankruptcy. So it becomes a cause not only for us as parents, but also from the political arena. I mean, as Eric alluded to, this past election year, we had one of the candidates out. They're stating basically he was an advocate of free education, which works from different perspectives. My question and my hope is that just the dialogue is now started, that you as parents, myself as a parent, we're not going to be saddled with unmanageable debt. Does it really take a Harvard or a USC to charge $70,000 or $80,000 a year to give our sons and daughters a quality education? And after doing this for as long as I have, I'm going to tell you, no, it doesn't. I think the health clubs are nice. I think the private masseuses are nice. I think the sun tanning rooms are nice, and the gyms are wonderful. But are they really necessary for the college experience? And I would say no, they're not. But that's really, unfortunately, what's driving the money higher and higher and higher. And of course, Harvard had 55,000 people apply for 800 openings. You have those type of numbers.
Gotcha.
College can basically set the rate and say, okay, well, they're still paying it. Let's keep going up. And they do.
Supply and demand.
Exactly.
So this would be a good time. So if anyone has any specific questions that are popping up for you, we do have some time to open up a little bit for some questions and continue the conversation. We're going to close this. We're not going to go any later than 11 a.m. We might close it a little sooner than that, depending on how many questions. But while you're thinking of those questions, I want to talk a little bit about what Phil does. And we told you if you'd stick around to the end of the webinar, we would have a little special offer for you. So what Phil's agreed to do, I was able to twist his arm a little bit, is he, as you can tell, he's very passionate about the educational system. Imagine yourself knowing the secrets behind just something as simple as the FAFSA form, knowing that there's so much money left on the table. Imagine knowing that and knowing that people were submitting an application the wrong way. There's a part of you that feels like you kind of want to be that voice on the wall, like scream into the crowd, like, don't do that. Let me pump the brakes. Like I have the information in my head that would like almost end this political debate, all this stuff. I know if I could just get it out there and help people with this, then it would literally change the the education system. So he has a very he's very passionate and very interested in helping everyone. So what he's agreed to do is for anyone that's on this webinar that would like to have your specific situation evaluated, get your questions answered about the FAFSA form and about applying for it. He's willing to do we say 30-minute or up to an hour actually.
An hour, yeah.
Consultation with you. Okay, so you can get an hour of Phil's time. He charges $250 an hour. You're getting it for free. Okay, we'll give you the links to that in a moment. So you're getting it for free. So matter of fact, I will go ahead and pop up. We have a link for you to do that. So give me just a moment here. All right, so you should see.
Let me just talk real quick about the process, and I think parents have to understand what we do. What we do is we take your sons and your daughters and we treat them as the most important commodity, if you will, if you want to call them a commodity, the most important possession that you have. Okay, and I think you'd agree with that. I know I would say that with my 3 boys. I personally handle them with all the respect and all the tender care I possibly can to make sure the choices that they're making are the right choices. And I mean that by saying, I don't want them after the first semester to pick up the phone and call you as a parent and say, you know what, Mom, you know what, Dad, I made the wrong decision. I need to come back home. This isn't the college I thought it was. If we can avoid that, and we avoid that simply by doing the process that we ask our students to go through, we can rest assured as parents that we don't have to worry about that phone call. Why? Because I've alluded to the fact that I've helped close to 4,000 students go through the process that we do. I've had six students come back home after they've left for college. So you can rest assured, and then those are great numbers. The fact of the matter is that students are having a great college experience, and they are not even thinking about coming home, because if they do, you've thrown that money away and you have to start over. They have to start over from square one at another institution. Okay, so we want to avoid that. So the process begins with your student, and again, I handle them with just the ultimate respect and figuring out with them what is going to be the best college where they'll never have to worry about picking up that phone and giving the call to the parent.
Very good. All right, we do have some questions rolling in, actually. Let's see here. A lot of them. Okay. There's a question from Jennifer. She's asking about how you calculate the EFC, what the formulas for that, and would you mention like any IRA that you have? Would that be part of that? If you have
well, let me take the first part first. How do you calculate your expected family contribution? Well, I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to go to any of the colleges that your son or daughter is interested in. And by federal law, somewhere on there, it's usually under the financial aid tab, there's a button that's called the net price calculator. If you were to click that, it's going to take you to another screen, and you'll have to answer, and really it depends upon the institution, sometimes several dozen questions detailing the questions that you'll be answering on the FAFSA form to come up with the expected family contribution for that school. That's a good first start. I mean, it gives you kind of a general overview. I think the fewer questions, the more broad you have to kind of consider that and take it with a grain of salt what that EFC is. But that's really one way of kind of figuring it out. So you at least have a number in your head about what could be my cost of education for my son or daughter. And the other thing is the IRA. There's a lot of different IRAs out there. Just your traditional IRAs, your Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs. I mean, all of them are retirement accounts in the FAFSA vernacular. So they're not assessed in the FAFSA. They are assessed in that other form, but not in the FAFSA. So are there better ones than others? Yeah, but it's all going to depend upon the parent, what their ultimate goal is.
Excellent. There's a question about if parents are divorced, does that affect how you calculate the AFC?
Absolutely does affect. Yeah, absolutely does. So when a parent is divorced, the potential to use one parent or the other in terms of the reporting parent, the financials for the reporting parent come into play. The definition really becomes who does the student live with the most, or who is responsible for the student's care. And so that determination needs to be made. If you include both parents in the FAFSA, you're again messing up the FAFSA and it's going to be thrown back to you. So you need to calculate based on a lot of different scenarios, but which parent are you going to use to calculate the expected family contribution, and whose information are you going to use on the FAFSA form to do that?
Gotcha. All right, to answer anyone who came in late, and if you missed some of the beginning of the webinar, some of you are mentioning that we are going to offer a replay for this. Should be up within about 24 hours. And I'm going to go ahead and do this as well. I'm going to take Phil. I'm going to take, with your permission, your 7 college secrets. You have it written out in an ebook form. I'm going to add it to that page, so if people want to download that, they can check it out as well. We had a question come in. If you Let's see. Oh, we had so many came in. That one just dropped down. Let's see. Okay. People are asking a little bit if you do anything. Do you help students with get better grades and on SAT and ACT testing, those kind of things?
Yeah, one of the parts of our service, again, is looking at every facet of college planning and how does that facet affect positively or negatively the college experience for the student. So one of the things, as you've just asked about, is the SATs and or ACTs. We do provide SAT and ACT prep assistance. We do it in the form of software. And we have other tools and other referrals that we can make if the student would do better in a one-on-one scenario. We don't do that here, but we do have firms that we work with that do provide that service. And that is one of the things, along with a bunch of other things that we provide for our kids that help the college experience become one that is knowledgeable for them and then maximizes their time and your time as a parent as well.
Yeah, guys, I've spent some time getting to know Phil, and the more I've asked about him and the college stuff, like I haven't hit the bottom of his knowledge on on the college stuff. There's so much stuff in between the lines that he just knows. That's very impressive. Let's see. Someone had a question about. She said Jennifer says if I said, will filling out the FAFSA, or will the FAFSA I filled out for my oldest son affect my second son?
Well, the FAFSA is a individual document for an individual student. Okay,
so no, in that case, right?
Yeah, you're gonna have to fill out a FAFSA for your current son and the younger son. Each one is going to have a FAFSA. However, remember that EFC that we talked about at the very, very beginning?
Mm-hmm.
When you have multiple students in college that are in the same family, you can cut your expected family contribution in half. So why is that important? Well, remember, the expected family contribution tells a college how much you can afford to send your son or daughter to their institution. Well, if you cut that in half because you have multiple students now in college at the same time, that's going to mean they both qualify for increased amounts of need-based financial aid, right? So that's why it's important that each one does have his own FAFSA, so you're maximizing that benefit as well.
All right. Lots of really good questions here. Let's see. I want to make sure I get to. If for some reason we have a lot of questions coming, guys, if for some reason I missed one, just realize, go ahead and request that consultation with Phil. The link's up for you guys. It's normally $250. You're getting it for free. We're talking about a free hour that could save you get you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars more in free money. But we're going to try to get as many questions as we can get answered here. Is there a time limit on when Darylyn's asking, is there a time limit on when to transfer ownership of a 529 account before filing FAFSA?
That's a great question.
Really good question.
So the answer to that is, realize that the FAFSA represents a snapshot of where you are at that moment that you push the submit button on your form. So is it essential that you transfer those assets right now? It can be, because it may take 2 or 3 days, and you want to make sure you have the time before you submit your FAFSA, but it's a snapshot. You don't have to do it 2 years before. You can do it a week before. If you're a financial planner, you can make that happen for you. So it's a snapshot. I need to stress that. It's a snapshot of where you are at that particular moment when you push submit.
Okay. Steve is asking if you can take early distributions from retirement accounts to pay for college. If so, does the EFC include those early distributions as part of it? Do you factor it into it?
Absolutely, they do. Yeah, it's called either untaxed income or taxed income, depending upon the type of distribution you're taking. And then if you don't pay that back with a certain period of time, now you've got a penalty to pay. So we are not big fans of borrowing from retirement accounts to pay for college.
Gotcha.
There's a lot better other methods and tools, but you want to exhaust first before you start dipping into your 401ks or 403bs or any of the things you do have access to that pay for college, that allow for college, like IRAs for college expenses. Before you dip into those, let's exhaust everything else before we get to that point.
Yeah, I say, Stephen, request that consult. Maybe tell Phil what your retirement accounts are, and I'm sure he can probably tell you some tips for your specific situation, what you could do.
Absolutely.
Sandra asked, does the reporting parent have to claim the child on their tax return?
That's a great question, Sandra. So no, they don't. In a split family situation, your ex-spouse can actually claim the student, but you would have the ability to file the FAFSA with your information. I get that question all the time, but that's the actual scenario. No, it doesn't. You don't have to claim the student to be able to fill out the FAFSA form and your information.
Gotcha. I'd like to congratulate. I see Jane, Sandra, Stephen, and Sharon. You guys have already requested your appointment, so congrats to you guys. You guys are going to be pleasantly surprised with that. We have Jane actually asked the question: what year of high school do you is it best? I think she's asking what's going to be the best year to apply for FAFSA, how soon you can, or
right. So applying for FAFSA is done in the senior year of the student in the October timeframe. So we're kind of coming up on it pretty quick for my senior kids right now. The best time, if you will, for me to meet with parents is generally in the sophomore, junior time period. Because remember I said earlier that if you have assets that can be repositioned to maximize your expected family contribution, sometimes we need to do that earlier. Even though it is a snapshot, sometimes we don't want to have that negative information reported on our tax return. And that's what the issue is. The things that we can move early that are not going to be on our tax return are going to be able then to help us with the expected family contribution and our assets. So both of those things come into play.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think that's pretty much, unless the bulk of the questions here, we can go ahead and start getting this wrapped up. So we definitely want to thank everyone who attended. We know that, I know Phil knows for sure that planning for college, it can be overwhelming. It can be a little bit stressful. There isn't a lot of clarity, unfortunately, on things like applying for financial aid. You're a little bit left to your own. So this is why we really want to invite you. Please take him up on this offer to spend an hour with him. It's for free. There's literally no risk with this. He's going to give you the information that you need to get that done correctly. It is the most critical step towards funding the college education for your child, because like we said, there's $2.7 billion left on the table. Don't be one of those stories. Don't be one of those situations where you feel like you're having to take out private loans and all this stuff, far beyond what you should have. The money is there. You just need to know how to take your current situation, get the right calculations. Phil has done this with almost 4,000 students. He probably talks in his sleep, answering FAFSA applications. So he knows how to do it, and everyone's going to have a little bit different situation. So we're giving you the 7 guidelines, but there's going to be some nuances to it that even when you're left your own with this, you might still need a little bit of calibration to it. So what do you have to lose? Let him look at your situation, get some help with the FAFSA, and go from there. It could literally mean the difference between thousands upon thousands of dollars in free college education for you. So please don't miss out on that. The link is up for you guys right now on the page. This is something he's not offering forever. You can see we do have a time frame on this. So this is something we're offering specifically to you guys because you've taken the time out of your day to come attend this webinar, and we want to know that we respect you for that. Like, it's a move towards knowledge is power. Okay, and this is about empowerment and getting you the knowledge that you need to get you the results that we know that you want, and that is much, much less financial burden for your college. So do you have any closing remarks, Phil, before we close this out?
No, I just want to thank everybody for being there today. It does begin with information. The information is out there, folks, but it's sometimes buried. We've taken the time over the 20 years we've been in business to find out where every opportunity is, and I can show you the books that we use to make sure that we maximize every scenario. And every scenario is completely different, not just a little bit, but completely. You can have a next door neighbor that's exactly the same income, same kids, but it can be completely different from their expected family contribution and what they're going to pay. So let us help you figure out for you what the lowest cost of college is going to be. And, we get thousands and thousands of people not every year, but over the time we've been doing this, that have had absolutely amazing experiences. And we'd like you to be added to that group as well.
Excellent. All right. So everyone, again, thank you. I'm going to click here to just go ahead and open that link for you guys in your browser. So it might open a new tab for you that should be coming through now. And again, we appreciate your time, and we'll go ahead and sign out. And best of luck to all of you.
Thank you. Good luck.